Hey, this is the Moose. I'm here with David Fraye, the Godfather over at RotoCurve, Moose.RotoCurve. To be specific, longtime partner with me. We were partners in crime back in the Project Roto days. Welcome to the golf club, Mr. David Fraye.
Well, thanks for having me, man. It's a pleasure to be on here.
Thanks. It's nice getting in, and I'm looking forward to kind of picking your brain on your process and how you go about setting lineups every week. I guess, do you want to just kind of start off that as an open-ended question? You know, what's your process every week?
I usually start Sunday night, Monday morning. Now that FNGC is up and running, I actually head there first because I like to look, usually Monday after the stats finalize, I like to look at basically who performed well the last 4 rounds, most specifically the weekend guys, to see kind of like how they're kind of trending. And it's the start of my week's research, usually because it's the primary goal is to find, those peaks and valleys of these golfers. And so when you're looking at the last 4 rounds, you can see if they're trending in the right direction or the wrong direction. And then you can branch out 8 rounds, 12 rounds, 24 rounds, 50 rounds, that kind of thing.
So Mondays when you start your research, you're heading over to Fantasy National. You're looking at kind of recent form, picking in those sets. Kind of how did Tuesday and Wednesday shake out? Is primarily research done Monday, and then you kind of like listen and watch for things, or how does that work?
Yeah, Monday I go there, start my research. I post my spreadsheet. I do all my research for my cheat sheet for that kind of stuff. I do that all Monday. And then Tuesday and Wednesday, I kind of spread out a little bit more. Like Monday is the initial plays. Like I research for probably about 2-3 hours. I get pretty much everything done. And I focus primarily on recent play, course history for a little bit of background. But really it comes down to recent play and how good a player is. And then for the fringe guys, like all the cheap scrubs that you want to do, okay, if this guy could pop, does he like playing at this course? Does this course fit his eye? And is he playing well right now? That's primarily what I do. And then Tuesday and Wednesday, it's kind of just like focusing on individual players to see if they pop, reading quotes, reading, stuff pretty much from everybody around the industry. And then Wednesday night, I usually finalize my cheat sheet, narrow down my core plays. And I'm building lineups throughout the whole thing, kind of just put in lineups as you build specific teams. And then Wednesday night, I kind of finish everything off.
How many lineups do you put in a given week? And how much of that is in tournament play? How much of that is in cash play? And do you do qualifiers or stuff like that?
I just do cash and GPPs. I don't really mess with qualifiers because I'm geared more towards profit-based. So I'm usually about 85-90% cash and then 10 to 15% GPPs. It depends on the week. How much I'll play and how much I'll play cash. And if I don't like the week, I'll just then play a little bit less and just play GPPs. But usually about 95% of the time I'll be playing cash. So go ahead.
So on your cash games, do you submit one lineup? What's your kind of philosophy on that? Do you have 3 lineups, mix guys around? How does that work?
It's changed over the last couple of years. I used to do 3. Then I kind of consolidated how much I play. I went from a lot a week to a couple hundred a week, just primarily because, just let's consolidate this a little bit. And so I usually play 1 core lineup now, and it works really well because I still have about a 70% win rate. So in cash games, so I found it more profitable over the long term. Instead of spreading your favorite plays out over 3 teams, you consolidate to 1 core team, and it usually works out pretty well.
When you're doing GPPs, how many lineups are you building? How many players do you like to select? And what's kind of, will you go 100% in on a guy?
I do go 100% on a guy if it's the Sony Open and Jordan Spieth's the only stud playing. I'll definitely go 100% in on a guy. If it's kind of this week at East Lake, I won't be going 100% in on a guy. I might go about 60 to 70% in on a guy. But because of the quality of the field, the variety is just so heavy that going 100% in on a guy, you're kind of you could swing and miss, and it could be really bad. I usually play about 20 lineups, maybe 30 lineups. Occasionally, I'll just drop 150 in there. Like last week, I dropped 150 because it was a no cut. I could really consolidate my plays. For 150 lineups, I'll have about 35 to 40 players in my pool. For about 20 lineups, I'll probably do about 15 to 18. I don't go much heavier than that.
Now, you've been a fairly successful GPP player as well, and I imagine that when you're doing lineups where you're going 60 to 100% in on a guy, you're going to have up and down weeks. Like, how many weeks do you kind of need? Like, if you win, like, what's kind of your goal is to have a big week every how often?
Yeah, the way you primarily want to do GPPs is you really want to kind of anticipate hitting something pretty big once every couple months, like maybe 3 or 4 months. If you manage to do that, you can stay pretty profitable. Obviously, it depends on the size, the amount that you win. And when you really win big, then you're set for a long while. But to remain profitable, I've found that if I hit a couple $1,000s every couple of months, which I do pretty consistently, then you remain profitable in GPPs and it remains worth it.
And then would you say, like the other time, what's the percent of those weeks where you're kind of right about breaking even, give or take 30%, and then how many of those weeks are you just getting your ass handed to you?
I consider a good week making all of your money back in GPPs. If you invest $400 in GPPs, I consider it a winning week if you make $350 to $400 back. If you make more than that, then that's good. But that's why I play mostly cash games so that my GPPs, if I just flat out bomb in GPPs, it doesn't really matter that much if my cash games hit. That's primarily how you stay profitable in this, in the industry, is that you really focus on those cash games. Because if you go, a couple months without a GPP takedown, you're still going to maintain that bankroll. You're still going to be able to maintain the same level of play without having to consolidate even more.
Tell me about Fantasy National and what sticks out most about Fantasy National. What tools do you think are the most valuable?
The thing I love most about Fantasy National is the fact that you primarily use strokes gained in pretty much every aspect of the site. Coupling that with the recent rounds instead of year-long rolling stats, it makes your research so much more accurate than just looking at the PGA Tour site or grabbing stats from there. But what Fantasy National does is it allows me to ask specific questions and get specific answers that before it was around, it was kind of hard to find those unless you counted those stats by hand, by round, and it was kind of hard to get those stats. I mean, something specific like strokes gained on bent grass greens or Bermuda greens. Like before Fantasy National was around, you really didn't have a way to find that. You could get it on the PGA Tour media site, but it was really hard to get. Like, I don't even know if you could find those specific rolling stats for bent grass and Bermuda grass. But on Fantasy National, you just go into the filter and you select that and you select how many rounds, and there you go. You have your accurate information. So, and it's such a valuable tool. We don't have that kind of information out there. Like a lot of these sports, like NFL has their data, MLB has their data, PGA has their data as well, but there aren't a lot of fantasy-friendly sites out there where you can access it. So that's why this is a step above at the current moment.
Hey, why don't you switch over and show me your screen here, and let's have you walk us through what you do on Fantasy National when you first get there. Have you been there yet this week and started researching for the Tour Championship?
Yep. So what I want to go in here is for this week at East Lake, I want to look at the last 4 rounds first because I want to see specifically who played well last week in Illinois, and I want to really see who's starting to trend in the right direction. So we can see for DK points, we can see all these guys here. We've got Leishman who won. We've got Day, who had the hole-in-one. We've got Ricky Fowler, who was always on the top of the leaderboards at this point. You know, that's primarily the goal of what I'm going to first. I really want to soak in who's playing well. We can see the price point of these guys, see if we have any specific values that stick out, like Kuchar sticks out, Schauffele sticks out. We got Finau who sticks out as well. But specifically this week, what we're looking at some sort of, we're kind of looking at, all right, who has the most glaring weaknesses? So we can go through and we can take a look at Bermuda grass. Let's do the last 12 rounds. Who's played really well on Bermuda grass? Who's getting the most strokes? And we'll do total. And we can see Mr. Chappell and Mr. Cantlay, they both have excellent putting stats on Bermuda. And Webb Simpson, of all people.
Can we click on that 12 next to Webb Simpson? I want to see what 12 rounds those that are being included that's putting him up there in putting.
Yeah. So this is Webb Simpson right here. And it looks like the last couple rounds he's played at Wyndham, the Players, and the Heritage. Those are the last 12 rounds he's played on Bermuda grass. Just
it looks like he's had some decent showings there too. It's interesting.
He's played really well this year, and this is one of the few guys who have figured out how to drop the long putter and kind of found success with the standard regulation putter, which is pretty impressive. He's a good price this week. He probably would be somebody who would go under owned, honestly. One guy who,
what's also interesting just about this is like right away when you were doing that, all of a sudden the top guys were almost all in the 7K range here.
Right. Yeah, it can show you some obvious value plays that are otherwise not obvious. And that's what I think is really good. Like it's going to be very difficult to hand select these rounds to find out who is the best plays. One interesting player this week is going to be Matsuyama. Obviously he's in the top 10 in putting on Bermuda in the last 12 rounds. This week, somebody tweeted out a picture of him today. He was trying 4 putters on the practice greens this morning. So he's going to be looking for either to get hot or whatnot with the putter this week. And we can take a look at him recently. That's actually not what I wanted to do. I wanted to go look at this. His last 12 rounds on Bermuda looks like the Players, the Arnold Palmer, and the Waste Management, where he always plays well. But
what's interesting too, just to point out, is that so all those kind of look like they all happen in around like, summer, early summer, summer, early spring. So it might also be worthwhile because it's been a while since they've been down south because it's been so hot, and they're kind of now starting to come back down around where you see the Bermuda, to now compare his rank on Bermuda to how he's just been playing on all rounds to see where that trend's going.
Yeah. So you can see, like, basically I'll just show the long form. This is what he's been recently. He's been awful with the putter in the last 3 tournaments he's played. You can see by his finishing position, he hasn't done that well regardless. 5 of the Dell is because of his strokes gained tee to green. And so he's clearly looking for that putting form. Look at he based it outside of the PGA and the Bridgestone. He has been awful with the putter ever since he won at the Waste Management, which was way back in February, right?
And he wasn't particularly good with the putter that week either.
Right. I mean, he didn't even gain a stroke, So he, basically it's showing you that as soon as Matsuyama can basically be field average, he can start competing. Like this is a little bit of an anomaly because his approach was off that week. But, all of his high finishes, you're going to see positive strokes gained putting. So with him changing up that putter in practice this week, it'll be interesting to see how he does. Because his strokes gained are, it's awesome. It's 6 strokes gained tee to green in his last 5 tournaments. Barely, nothing gained putting, but it's been better than it has been all summer. So he's a guy that would be interesting because he's only 9K on DraftKings this week.
Would you try just filtering on Tour Championships so we can see how he's putted this course before too? Type in Tour.
Okay.
Now you go. So now you've just filtered down on Tour Championship there, I see.
Right.
And look at that. So he's bipolar here in his putting, it appears.
Yep. Well, not really. I mean, in 2014, he, was awful. And then in 2015, he started to figure out the greens. And then 2016, he really figured out the greens. And somehow lost a stroke tee to green. So it's an interesting play this week. I'm not sure how popular he's going to be. Everything I've heard so far this week is don't play Matsuyama, fade Matsuyama. He's 9K. He's a trap. I don't know. It was one of the guys that stood out to me in terms of he's being talked up negatively, and there could be something interesting happening here. So I find it kind of interesting how his history has been awful, regular, and pretty stinking good with the putter there. So yeah, and then over strokes gained tee to green, it's been going completely the opposite direction. So this is going to be interesting this week. But he's a player I kind of like a lot.
Well, very cool, David. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this. It'd be fun to go through a bunch of guys, but I think it was pretty cool the way that we walked through just a single scenario. We looked at how everybody played last week. Then we started to look at how people had played over the last 12 rounds on Bermuda greens. Then we compared that against how they played just on normal greens. And then we dove into Hideki and just kind of dissected where his numbers are coming from.
Yeah, exactly. That's an excellent way to use the website. It's essentially a surefire way to look at stats and to see if there's anything like what's trending, what isn't trending, what is there something odd going on with his form? Like it's all sitting there, and it's pretty awesome.